Hey free-to-play gang, welcome back to another video. Now today's video pertains to what I'm going to cover tomorrow, so this is going to be very important and knowing this information might help you out a lot as well. So for today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about all the legendary Espers and all of their resonances as well, and I have gone ahead to highlight some of the key resonance points. So the point of this video is to give you guys an idea of which resonance tiers are very important for the Esper. Now I'm not just talking about whether the resonance is good or not, I'm talking about whether is it good for that Esper pertaining to its function. Oh, and before I forget, this Excel spreadsheet was actually done by Dislyte. If you guys do not know who he is very active in the main court and in my Discord server as well, so huge shout out to you. So for example, if you're talking about Abigail, Queen's Gift, Absorb extended 3 turns, this seems good, but is it really useful for her? I don't really think so. It doesn't really carry a lot of value. So for Espers like Abigail, she works the best at R0 and there's very little reason why you want to go and give her extra resonances if you could choose to do so. Now next we have Ahmed over here. So all of his R2, R4 and R6, they are all really good. Now his R2 is really good for PvP, but his R4 and R6 is just really good everywhere. Next we have Ashley, and her main resonance tier is going to be R2, where she starts to give shields to all allies for 1 turn. Her R6 is also decent so that she don't eat her own Rainbow Bridge stacks, but I don't think it's really going to change a lot in terms of like her general usefulness. Next we have Bion, and I think her main resonance is her R6, where ignoring defense no longer has a condition, so she's able to ignore defense on buffed enemies as well. Which I think is very important because I hate the fact that she has a lot of RNG in her kit where she needs to remove the buffs of specific Espers in order for her to function. And with R6, you do not need to worry too much about not stripping all the buffs from the enemy, like if you didn't max your second skill for example, right? It's not going to be that important anymore. Next up we have Brewster, and he has 2 main resonance tiers. The first is going to be R2, where at the start of combat he gains 3 reload attack stacks, and why this is so good is you can completely change the way he is built. You no longer need to give him speed for him to take the first turn. He already starts off with the reload attack stacks, and therefore he's able to assist at the start of every single wave, and he's also able to push his own AP this way at the same time. Now, his R6 is also really strong because right now he does splash damage to 1 random enemy as well, which is an extra 50% of his attack. So whenever his support attacks, he's actually going to damage 2 different enemies, which is very powerful. But of course for him, I think the main one is going to be R2. That's where he starts to be very crazy in many different content. Now next up we have Changji, and his main resonance tiers are going to be R2 and R6. So for R2, this changes from copying the enemy's max HP to now swapping the enemy's max HP. So not only are you swapping your low HP with the enemy's high HP, you're going to follow with a nuke afterwards, and that can also kill that enemy that you just swapped with. But at R6, he becomes a very strong AP battery for your entire team, which is very nice to have. Next up we have Cecilia, and her R6 is going to be the main point for her. So right now from 50%, all your revive allies AP boost is changed to 100%. So they're going to take a turn immediately whenever Cecilia revives like her entire team for example, which is insane. Next we have Clara, and her main resonance is going to be R2, where her immunity is extended 2 turns, so that now after using her AP push, your allies take a turn, they do not lose their immunity instantly. So now they still have 1 more immunity buff, which is very helpful. Now Dona, okay, I know I shouldn't really be talking about Dona because he's free, but for some reason I just decided to color him anyway. Oh, same reason why I didn't talk about Camille as well, because she's completely free, so yeah. But his main resonance is going to be his R2 Thundercrack passive. When Thunder Blessing reaches max stacks, he then gains 1 turn immediately to instantly land his passive nuke. Next up we have Elaine. I don't think any of these resonances really matter a lot for her kit. I think she's good enough at R0. Some people might say that her R6 is important, but I think it is just okay, it's just decent. You really don't need it. It's not super important in my opinion. Now as for Elliot, he is definitely an R6 Esper. Now he cannot be resisted anymore, which means that you do not need to have accuracy on him for his 3rd skill to land all the time. But the thing is, he still can miss. So he is not going to be very efficient against flow type enemies, but for the most part, against wind type enemies, inferno, shimmer type enemies, he is guaranteed to full cooldown reset and remove all buffs on these enemies, which is a really good counter against JJ, a really good counter against Gabriel as well, and Abigail. So these are some of the major usefulness that he has. Now as for Embla, she has 2 main resonance tiers. First is going to be R2. This is a very big one, and her R6 as well, where you reduce the maximum stacks requirement from 8 to 5. But of course her R2 is probably like the main one, because right now instead of a single target nuke, she is now able to do AoE damage, which is very helpful, and it changes her kit a lot as well. Now next up Ethan, very similar to Changji, his main resonances are R2 and R6. So R2, he starts the combat with Magic Tune, which means your whole team gets an extra 20 speed and an extra crit rate and all that at the start of each wave, which is very powerful. But his R6 is also really insane, especially when the enemies have a lot of AP pushers, like if they have Clara, if they have Jian for example, he is going to be a really good counter against such teams. Now Everett is free, so I'm going to skip him. Now Phantom Sisters, I don't think that they really deserve any kind of resonances at all. They are good enough at R0. And now Nusi, she is really good at R2 and R6. So at R2, her first skill, which can hit up to 5 enemies, will steal 1 buff from each target hit. And as for her R6, taking a hit no longer consumes Paper Talisman stacks. So whenever she gets hit, she's going to gain AP, but at the same time, she's not going to reduce Paper Talisman stacks. So she can still hit 5 targets all the time and start stealing buffs from all of them with her R2 effect, which is very, very powerful. So Nusi at R6 is insane. Now next we have Gabby. Her R6 is probably like the main one because her immunity is extended to 3 turns, which severely improves her immunity uptime, and this is really good for her general utility. Now Gaia strives in his R2 and his R6, especially his R6, because this increases his damage output by up to 20%, which is very strong. But his R2 actually makes him a little bit more of a support as well, in addition to the fact that he's such a strong nuker, right? So his R2 in his normal mode, he increases all allies' accuracy by 20%, which is whatever that he's able to provide at the start because he starts off in his human mode. But in his God King mode, all of your allies crit rate plus 20%. So it's quite important that he's probably like one of the faster Espers in, like, let's say your Chrono 16 lineup, so that after he transforms, he's able to provide a crit buff to, let's say, your Ollie or your Xiao In, for example. Next, we have Hyde, and his main resonances are going to be R2 and R6. So at R2, he becomes really useful, especially in a knockout, and at R6, he starts the combat being able to revive himself, and at the same time, every single 10 stacks that he has, he's going to have extra damage mitigation, and he's going to have extra damage output as well, so it's very good for his kit. And next we have Ife, and I think her main change is probably going to be R6, although I wouldn't really recommend it. So right now, her first skill, instead of launching a pursuit attack, it is now changed to gaining 1 turn, so this allows you to proc Ocean a little bit better. And of course, this cycles your cooldown a lot more on her first skill itself. So I think running her Astro is actually pretty good as well. But why I don't think this might be a good idea is because her main usefulness right now is in the Calamity Island. But the thing is, if you keep gaining turns this way, that could eat into your total turn count. Next, we have Intisar, and she actually has 2 very powerful resonance here. So the first is going to be R2. This is okay. I'll say this is okay. This cycles her third skill much better, like by 33% or something like that. But her main one is probably her R6, where she provides an attack up buff to all allies. So she becomes very important for speedrunning a lot of stuff. Next, Jiang Jiuli probably don't have any very good resonances at all. And now Jin Yu Yao, her R2 and R6 is also really good. So her R2 increases the AP push that she received by 50%, so it actually goes up to 30% whenever any one of your allies get debuffed, which is very powerful. And of course, at the end of her turn, she removes 1 more debuff on herself. But her R6, whenever an ally is inflicted with a stun or petrify or freeze, her third skill ability cooldown actually reduces by 1 turn, so that allows her to cycle a lot, and she's very good against a typical speed control team. Next one, we have Leora, and I think unlike Elaine, her R4 is actually really good because she does a lot of damage. So this is very important for her because of what she's used for, which is for damage output. Now, Louis strives a lot at his R6 because right now, after killing a target, he will then attack all enemies based on 50% of the overkill damage. So the thing is, he has Seer on his second skill, which allows him to deal even more damage as well. So this definitely adds on to his overkill damage. Now, as for Liling, it's basically just his R6, where his third skill would allow him to absorb up to 150% AP just by using it, because it triple hits on every single one of the enemies. So he's able to instantly steal a turn after using his third skill, right into his second skill, which allows him to maybe snipe something in Point War, for example. Now, Nama, he is clearly an R6 Esper, there is no debating this. And as for Ollie, his R2, R4, and R6 are all really good in my opinion. So R2 increases the invincibility on your allies by up to 2 turns, which is very powerful for Chronos, especially when you want to have a little bit more secure runs. And his R4 is really good in PvP because you do not really want him to die at the start. You want him to be able to survive so that he can protect one of your allies. And his R6 just makes him really good, especially when he has full skill ups, because he's able to cycle through his passive really quickly. And as for Ophelia, I don't think there are any resonance tiers that are important at all. And now Raven, so her R2 is probably where it's at, but the thing is, comparing an R2 Raven and R0 Nusi, I'll definitely take the R0 Nusi. I think Nusi is still a lot stronger in this regard. Now Sally, she is straight up an R6 Esper. At R6, she becomes extremely broken for many different content, not just PvP, in PvE as well, because she always has the Sweet Harvest state at the start of any single wave. Now Sienna is also going to be one of those Espers who strives a lot in R2, R4, and R6, a very rare Esper indeed. All of her resonances here really add to her effect. So for example, her second skill increases the attack up and speed up buff that she provides to 3 turns, which is very helpful. And her R4, she's always going to be on cooldown, which increases her speed, and that allows her to cycle between her third, second, and first skill a lot more efficiently. And her R6 is just extremely broken, right? 2 turns of stun on every single one of the enemies. It is insane. Now moving on to Tungsten, his R2 and R6 are both really good, but primarily his R6. So his first skill, now the number of targets taking splash damage is increased to 4, which is insane. Go take a look at his first skill, right? This already has up to 120% single target nuke, and the splash itself is 80%. So in total, what we're actually looking at is a 440% nuke on his first skill every single time he uses this. And at the same time, he's able to launch pursuit attacks, which is insane. So his R6 is incredibly broken, like very, very powerful. But of course, the main issue with this is using him in PvP would then trigger a lot of Avatara counter attacks, which is not very good unless you build him a little bit more of a hybrid DPS, which I think is a perfectly good idea because he has so much damage on his first skill. Next up, we have Tever, and I think his main change is going to be his R2 because right now he's able to kill bosses more efficiently. And as for Tia, it's probably going to be mostly her R6, but her R4 is also pretty good, especially when using her in like longer PvP fights, for example. So she's able to get her skills up more efficiently. Now, as for Triki, mainly R2 and R6, especially his R6. His R6 is really good against the tanky meta right now. Whenever the enemies cleanse themselves, they're always going to lose minimally 15% of their HP, which is very powerful. But of course, the speed down on his third skill is insane because this not only applies miss rate up, your third skill now also applies speed down, which is very powerful, very useful. And of course, that adds an extra debuff for the enemies to cleanse, which means his passive will then trigger a lot more often as well. Now, Una's is mostly an R2 Esper, but I do feel like his R6 is pretty strong because his first skill is able to push your allies' AP by up to 15% if you have a full crit on his first skill. Now next, Yuntruan is clearly an R2 Esper and a must-have as well. So if you have a Yuntruan, try to get him to R2, he becomes very potent and he opens a lot of doors for you. And now Yuhime, I don't think any of her resonances are important at all. I think she's mostly an R0 Esper, but she is pretty good at being an R0 Esper. And finally, we end off with Zora. So R2 is really good because now her third skill inflicts a defense down, which is very, very helpful. And her R6, whenever any one of her allies attack, she has a 15% chance to assist with Keen Edge, which is really good, especially in Shadowfire or like in some of the content that you'll be using her to cleave stuff. Like for example, in any of the tower content. So yeah, that's it for this video. These are all the legendary Espers and all of their resonance tiers that I think are very meaningful and very important to have. If you have any other questions pertaining to some of these Espers, or you want to clarify like maybe why is it that some of these Espers are not showcased in this video itself, let me know down in the comment section below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But anyway, with that said, that's the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, leave a thumbs up. It really helps the channel, and subscribe for more Dislyte content. Now with that said, this has been Free to Play, and as always, I will see you in the next video.